And welcome once again to The Grey Matter. It's here where we look at strange and in some cases quite disturbing events that have happened around the world. Some will be well known to you, others maybe not so. Today we'll be looking at the strange abduction of Travis Walton, a well-documented case but also one that over the years has had its fair share of criticism and derision from various skeptics. But that said, let's take a neutral stance on it, review the facts and treat it like we're the jurors in a court case. And only then, with the evidence before us, can we decide whether we believe the story to be true or false. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. The supposedly true story happened back in 1975 and takes place in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in northeastern Arizona, where 7 young lumberjacks were working on a tree thinning contract. The foreman was Michael Rogers, an easygoing guy of 28 years, and with him was his friend Travis Walton, a typical 22-year-old guy with an adventurous spirit. The other 5 were John Goulet, Kenneth Peterson, Steve Pierce, Dwayne Smith and Alan Dallas. Now, by all accounts, these men were not friends, but mostly got along with each other okay, except for Dallas, who could at times be confrontational. November the 5th passed much the same as every other day, apart from the dispute between Alan Dallas and Travis. Now, this in itself was not unusual, as the 2 men already had something of a problem with each other. So when Dallas allowed a tree to fall dangerously near to where Travis was working, things did get a little heated. But despite this incident, the team made good progress, and by 6 o'clock, with the sun starting to set and the air starting to cool, it was time to call it a day and head for home. The 7 men loaded their chainsaws and fuel cans into the cargo area of Mike Rogers' old pickup truck and climbed into the cab, with 3 at the front and 4 crammed onto the rear seat. As usual, Mike drove and Travis rode shotgun. They hadn't gone very far before they spotted an eerie yellowish light pouring through the trees ahead of them on the right-hand side of the track. And at this point, they weren't nervous at all, just curious as to what was causing the strange glow. As they drew level, they stopped, and in a clearing from where the light radiated, the 7 men had a clear view of something that none of them would ever thought possible. There it hovered, just above the ground, wobbling slightly like a spinning top, yet not rotating. About 20 feet in diameter, it resembled 2 pie pans placed together lip to lip with a smaller dome on top. The finish was described as having the lustre of metal, fresh from a blast furnace, and at this point they all started to become a little afraid, apart from Travis, who decided he needed to get a better look. So ignoring all the warnings and protests from the other 6, he climbed out of the truck and made his way towards it. As he stood there watching it, he could hear a low rumble of infrasound accompanied by several much higher frequencies. And transfixed, he could now do little more than just stare, and the strange craft started to rock gently before him, the noise intensifying with each passing second, until finally Travis snapped out of his trance and turned to head back to the truck. But he had left it too late. A bolt of energy from the craft hit him hard in the chest, throwing him onto his back where he lay unconscious. Back in the truck, the 6 men screamed and shouted for Mike to start the engine and get the hell out of there while they still could. But Mike was already fumbling with the keys. "It's got him," cried Steve as the truck roared along the rough track, careering from side to side as it went. A sudden jolt from under the wheels brought Mike to his senses. If he wrecked the pickup, they would be stuck here with that thing, with that saucer. "We have to go back," he said, pulling the truck to a halt. "No way am I going back there," replied one of the others. In the end, Mike Rogers told them, "I'm going back. Anyone that doesn't want to can get out now." Now, there were of course some protests, but nobody wished to leave the pickup. So with considerably less haste than before, the 6 men returned to where they had left Travis, who they now believed was quite possibly dead. When they reached the site, to their surprise, not only was the craft not there, but there was no sign of Travis either. Dead or alive, somehow he had gone. Now there was nothing left for them to do but go and alert the town sheriff. Meanwhile, slowly Travis regained consciousness. He was flat on his back on some kind of table and wondered if he was in a hospital. But if so, why was he still clothed, and just how badly hurt was he? He tried to move, but even the slightest movement was too much to bear. But at least he was coming round. Images were becoming sharper. He could now make out what looked to be some kind of light diffuser above him. The room was small, with a strange triangular shaped ceiling. Out of the corner of his eye, he could just make out the blurry images of the doctors. But then he looked a little harder. There were 3 of them in total, dressed in tan coveralls. Their faces were pale with huge black pupilless eyes, no nose and merely a slit for a mouth. Travis recoiled, threw himself off the table, now fully conscious, and grabbed a glass tube that was lying beside him. Wielding it like a sword, he eyed the doorway, which, somewhat convenient, was behind where the creatures were standing. But they were tiny, only about 4 feet in height, physically not very intimidating, even if their presence was. Travis moved nearer and knocked into one of them with his hand. He recalls it feeling spongy, no sinew or muscle, no resistance at all. And as it was, he didn't need to get past them as they just turned and walked out of the room, leaving him just standing there. Within seconds, he had also left the room, yet turned down a corridor which led in the opposite direction to the one that the creatures had exited by. Only a few metres from the room he had just left, a doorway lay open. Fearing what might be in there, but knowing also that it might be the only way out, Travis plucked up his courage and entered the room. As it was, there was nobody in there, only a high-backed chair facing away from him, rendering it impossible to see if there was anyone actually in it or not. He moved slowly nearer and, to his relief, finding it to be empty. The background light had now dimmed in the room as he walked, but other light, sharper light, seemed to seep through the walls and ceiling, making an effect rather like the night sky. There was an illuminated panel on the arm of the chair resembling a control panel. And possibly thinking that at this point he had nothing left to lose, Travis did what I know I would have been too terrified to do. He pressed it with his finger. Some lines on the screen changed direction and shifted, but that was all. He was just wrapping his hand around a small lever protruding from the chair when he was aware of somebody else entering the room. He spun around and, to his relief, saw that it was a human being, dressed in blue coveralls and wearing some kind of helmet. The man was tall and well built and now beckoned for Travis to follow him, leading him down a ramp into what looked like some kind of hangar. He looked back at the craft he had just exited and saw that it was different to the original one from the forest, much larger. 3 other saucers sat over to one side. The tall Nordic-looking man led him through another door and into a room where 3 other humans, 2 men and a woman, were seated. Unlike the man who had accompanied Travis, they wore no helmets but had the same perfect looks, the lean muscular bodies and smooth skin. They resembled each other as brothers and sisters so often do. "Would somebody tell me where I am?" asked Travis, but none of them replied. Instead, the woman and one of the men just walked towards him, pushed him gently back onto the edge of the table and placed a small mask over his face. The next thing Travis could remember was waking up on the side of the road just outside the town of Heber. It was dark, but he could clearly see the saucer glowing against the night sky as it departed. Scrambling to his feet, he ran until he found a phone booth where he immediately called his brother Grant, who at first suspected that it might be a hoax. When he realised that it wasn't, he collected another brother, Dwayne, and drove off into the night to collect Travis. They found him still slumped in the phone box, confused and dehydrated. He had been missing for a whole 5 days. Now, as I mentioned earlier, many have tried to debunk this story, but numerous polygraph tests have either revealed that not only Travis but the 6 others were telling the truth, with only Dallas registering an inconclusive. The men have stuck rigidly to their story over the years until 2021, when Michael Rogers stated on social media, "I, Michael H. Rogers, being of sound and rational mind, do hereby give notice that I am no longer to be considered a witness to Travis C. Walton's supposed abduction of November the 5th, 1975. In my opinion, this is by no means a denial of the event itself, but rather somebody who has quite possibly just had enough of being questioned about it over the years. Remember, it wasn't his story, so this would be an understandable reaction. If you were to take the view that it was a hoax, then it stands to reason that all 7 men would have had to have been in on it. And yes, I know that lie detector tests can be unreliable, but what would be the odds of even just 2 or 3 of them passing, telling the same fabricated story? And just say that miraculously all of them did tell the same lie and passed. Surely at least one of them would have broken rank by now and confessed to it being a hoax, perhaps when he'd had a few too many or bearing his soul to a partner. It would have been completely understandable for one of them to say, "Hey, Travis has had recognition, a book, a film out of this. Time I got something too," and then turn around and sell the revised version of events to the highest bidder. And so there you have it. Was Travis telling the truth? And if not, how did they pass those polygraphs? However fantastic this story is, it's pretty difficult to disprove. And over the years, there has certainly been enough people trying to do just that. So, thank you for watching. And if you've enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, share and comment and hit that bell for further notifications. See you soon.